So I want to talk about a misconception that a lot of people have when it comes to the way that God talks to us. And I talked about this previously, but again, when God puts a word back in my spirit, I have to talk about it because it might be crucial for somebody listening. Um, a lot of us have the misconception that God is always talking to us. We just have to learn to listen. That's false. God is not always talking to you. God is not always answering your questions. He's not always talking, right? And again, I talked about this before and I bring it up a lot, but when Jesus was being crucified, he asked the Father multiple questions. He asked the Father, Father, can this cup be passed from me? Father, why have you forsaken me? And the Father ignored him, right? And it wasn't in a way to abandon him. It wasn't in a way to neglect him or, just leave him. It was a way to tell him, this is what you're supposed to do. You know the answer already, right? The only reason one of the reasons Jesus was asking questions was because he was still a human, right? His flesh felt feelings. He didn't want to die that way. It hurt. That was painful, right? He knew he could have got himself off the cross, but he knew that he had to do it. And God already told him. The video stopped, but he already put it in his spirit. He was God, right? He was the son of God, but he was God, so he knew what he had to do. But he asked questions because he was in a flesh, and a flesh asks questions of doubt. It asks his questions when it feels like it's in pain, when it doesn't understand. So because he asked a question doesn't mean that God was supposed to just answer him and be like, hey, I haven't left you, just so you know. There was no time for questions, right? If you already know the answer, there's no questions I have to answer. There's no questions I have to answer. You know that you're the Messiah. You know that you have to die on this cross. You know your destiny. I called you to it, right? Same with you. If you're asking God questions, now there's a difference. There's a difference with asking God questions because you're actually confused versus you asking questions because you're doubting him. That's different. And I talked about that in one of my videos of it's okay to question God, because a lot of people say like you can't question God. Yes, you can, but you have to learn the difference, right? There's a difference with questioning him, asking questions and being like, God, what do? I actually don't know. Or what does this mean? Or what does this verse mean, God, just for clarification? Versus you being like, God, should I do this? When he already told you the answer 50 times when you asked before, right? There's multiple reasons why God isn't answering you. For one, the major one is that you already know the answer, right? A lot of times when we ask God questions, we already know the answer. And the only reason we're asking is because our flesh wants to do it, right? God, should I go over that boy's house? Should I go over this girl's house? Should I get drunk? Should I smoke with my friends? Should I go party and stay up all night? Should I do bad things? We already know the answer to that. Read the Bible, it's in there, right? Like, we know the answer to it. It's just that our flesh wants to make excuses to go and do it. So God's not answering you. A lot of times God will not answer you when you ask questions like that because you know it, right? He doesn't care that you ask questions, but understand that he's not always going to give you an answer because for one, you probably know it. For two, you have to pay attention to the season that you're in, the position that you're in, because you might be going through a test. And back to, Jesus being crucified. That is a test in itself. You know how many people were telling him, yeah, if you're really the Messiah, if you're really the Son of God, get yourself off that cross. The people next to him, yeah, if you're really the Messiah, get us down from here. That was a test. He could have easily been like, you know what? I take myself off of here. Yep, I'm the Messiah. But he knew that he couldn't do that. He knew that he had to die. And he knew what he even prayed and said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing, right? Because he knew what he had to do. It was in his spirit to know. So you have to pay attention if you're going through a test to where God already prepared you, right? There's a season of God preparing you for something. And then when you have that test, God will get quiet, right? And I had an analogy before of a teacher. When a teacher is giving a test, they get quiet, just like God. He's the teacher. When he's putting you through a test, he'll get quiet because he knows that he taught you the answer. You already know the answer. Make the decision, right? We can't ask God for every single thing. God, should I do this? Should I do this? No, you know the answer. Your spirit already knows. Kill your flesh. Tell your flesh to die. You already know the answer. Pick it. Another one is God might tell you you can't get the answer right now. If we say, God, who is my husband or wife going to be? God might not answer you that. It might not be time for you to know. Or God might just simply say, you can't give this answer, which is him replying to you. But sometimes he'll completely not say anything. God, who's my husband going to be? God, what is my children's names going to be? He won't answer. And then we have to realize, oh, it's because I'm not supposed to know that yet. Okay. So understand that if we're talking about Jesus or God talks all the time, meaning like his silence speaks, then sure, because his silence is actually him talking. If he's silent, if he's not talking to you, that is an answer in itself. That either means you know the answer, that means you're in a test and he prepared you to know the answer. That means that you're not supposed to know the answer right now. That means that he's working behind the scenes and you have to learn to trust him. It's all the answer. But understand that if he's silent, that for one, that is still speaking, but verbally telling you things and answering your questions, he doesn't always do that. If he did that, we would all be going through these seasons smoothly, but we don't, because we have questions, because God doesn't answer us sometimes we get confused. We have a flesh that likes to doubt. So I don't know who needs to hear that, but God is not always talking. So don't think that just because he's not talking, you're not on the right path. Or, when people say like God is always talking, you just need to learn to hear him. If God never talks to you, that's different. But if you're saying God needs to be always talking, he's not always talking. He's always working. That's different. He's always working. He's not always talking, because depending on your situation, you either might not get the answer, you might not need to get the answer, or you know the answer. So again, I don't know if you need to hear that, but take that back to God. Make sure you pray on that, and have a good day.